Hello there. Now, this is going to be my last video for quite some time. Um, I'm going to be taking a long break from YouTube. So I will be back eventually, but it probably won't be for a couple of months. So just to let you know, I haven't fallen off the face of the earth. I'm just taking a break. So anyway, today I want to talk about Ireland, and particularly its early and I suppose relatively short-lived imperial pretensions. So when you think of Ireland, you don't think of an empire. And well, to be honest, it didn't really ever manage to turn into a proper empire. But that's for several reasons, I suppose. For a start, Rome had already taken over pretty much all of Europe. And so they were quite limited in what they would be able to do. But you do see a period in the sort of around 200 CE or AD, if you're old-fashioned, where the Irish were colonizing, and they were colonizing, you know, the favorite whipping boy, which is Britain. So I mean, Britain is always blamed for everything by Ireland, generally speaking. And it's true that Britain did invade Ireland. The Normans, of course, invaded Ireland in 1167 onwards. But what people often forget is that Britain was itself invaded many times. It was invaded long before the Romans arrived. It was invaded by the Irish. It was invaded by the Scandinavians many times. It was also invaded by the Saxons, and then it was finally invaded by the Normans, who took over the entire country of Britain. It really wasn't how it is now. It was, a dozen or so small kingdoms at the time. Anyway, they very savagely united what was England at the time, many different kingdoms. They savagely took over Wales as well, and attempted to do so with Scotland, and had some limited success there, just as the Romans had limited success too. Up Scotland, nobody can beat the Scots. Anyhow, I digress. So, they skipped across the channel from Wales, which they were still subduing, and they succeeded in invading Ireland. Although the colonization didn't go quite as they planned, over time it shrunk and shrunk and shrunk down to what is called the Pale, which is the area surrounding Dublin. Really, the rest of the country was reclaimed. And then it was really from the reign of Henry VIII this started to reverse, and that job was completed by Elizabeth I. So for about 400 years, Ireland was completely dominated by England. Prior to that, it had been sort of partially invaded and with some limited success. Anyway, going back to the main subject, Ireland did in fact invade Britain. You'll find there's two major areas of invasion, and probably because of the Romans, they weren't able to sort of do a whole lot more than sort of take bits of Britain. And I suppose the Saxons who invaded Britain, and also the Vikings, had much better technology than the Irish did. At a time when they were using very old-fashioned weapons in Ireland, both the Saxons and the Vikings were quite advanced in metallurgy and the use of iron, and had sort of far superior weapons. So that kind of prevented any kind of real expansion in Ireland beyond the sort of the borders of Britain, really, which I'll come to now. Well, firstly, of course, we've got Wales, which is known to the Welsh as Cymru, and they invaded the west coast and took quite a quite a reasonable size of sort of what's now Wales. They took Anglesey, which is some Gwynedd. The Romans called that Mona, which is famously the last holdout of the British Druids before the Romans sort of wiped them out. They also took a large portion of Dyfed, if I've said that correctly. Sorry, I'm not very good with the Welsh. Anyway, they also famously took slaves from Wales and brought them back. And there's a lot of sagas. There's, accounts of this ongoing wars between the Irish and the Welsh. And Brand of Blessed is a very famous battle sort of story, which includes a severed head that talks. I won't go into that. That's for another day. You can look it up online easily enough, or in a book of mythology. So apart from killing people and colonizing the place and putting up homestones, they took quite a lot of slaves, the most famous of all being St. Patrick, who is famously taken as a slave to Ireland and comes back later as a bishop of Rome and starts trying to convert everyone to Christianity. A process that actually took a very long time, so something close to 400 years rather than instantaneous conversion that the church would have you believe happened. Of course, it wasn't like that at all. That's all just little Christian propaganda and outright lies, to be honest. So anyway, getting back to this, the Welsh did eventually manage to kick out the what are referred to as Desai people. There's I think it's 8th or 9th century manuscript called The Expulsion of the Desai, which is about these people, although seeming a lot of their descendants continue to live in Wales as well. And was still quite a powerful group at that time when this account was written. So that was their first colony. And the second colony is, of course, Scotland. Alba, or Pictland, as it's sometimes referred to, or Caledonia. The Irish referred to it as Alba, and in fact in the modern language the word Albanac means Scotsman. Which is kind of funny because it reminds me of the fact that an Englishman is called a Sassenach, which actually comes not from sort of the British or the Norman, but from the Saxon. The name it basically means Saxon. So it's kind of somewhat of a misnomer, really, because the English aren't really Saxons. They're kind of a mixture of, I suppose, Celts, Vikings, Normans, Romans, and Saxons and Jutes. So, really it's a bit of a mix-up there, really, but that name stuck somehow, and that's what English people are still referred to this day. In fact, it's sometimes used in a sort of prerogative way as a bit of an insult to call someone a Sassenach. Is not necessarily a good thing, Anyway, getting back to what I'm supposed to be talking about, they had an invasion from the north of Ireland into what is now Scotland and established a kingdom called Dal Riada. Okay, so this actually means the portion of Ruada or Reada. There's different spellings of this person's name, who is obviously sort of the mythical founder of this new state in the western half of Scotland. This included a lot of the islands, including famously Iona, which you may have heard about, and Columcille, or Columba as he's more often known. So that was an important colony for Ireland. And this was established probably around 300 CE, lasting to perhaps 800 or so. It would appear at some point the last of the sort of Pictish kings sort of tried to take over the Irish colony and maybe succeeded to some extent, but then it appears that the Picts themselves disappeared. They were sort of reconquered, it would seem, by the Scots people, which are obviously the people from Ireland, because the name Scotland actually comes from the progenitor of the northern tribes called Scotia, who herself actually seemingly came from Egypt and had arrived with the Malaysian Gaels quite some time prior to that, perhaps as much as sort of 1500 years before the invasion of Scotland by the Irish. We don't know for sure. It's hard to be exact about these things. A lot of the dates are very, very vague at this time in history. But anyway, one of the most famous people associated with Dalriada is Niall of the Nine Hostages, who is sort of the sort of progenitor, if you like, of the O'Neill family. Although he's not the first in the line, he's the most famous. Sort of that family or clan took its name from him because of his great successes as a ruler in Ulster and also in Dalriada. Now, it's thought that he ravaged a lot of Scotland. He expanded their territory enormously, and there's stories, probably quite fictitious, about him going off on a jolly across Europe with his army and sort of ravaging huge portions of what was then Gaul, and further again did a bit of a circuit of Europe, maiming and pillaging and God knows what else, collecting booty and slaves probably, and then finally returning back to Ulster. This is all obviously just legend, so we don't really know if he actually did leave Britain and go to Europe or not. It could all just be a sort of fantastic story. But seemingly he was a very impressive leader of his time, and it's quite possible that he may have ventured into Europe. Although whether he actually conquered as many places temporarily as he claims to have done is anyone's guess. It does seem a bit like he's sort of an Irish version of Alexander the Great. So it's quite possible to sort of make him seem more impressive. The stories are maybe somewhat exaggerated, although maybe we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and perhaps he did get quite some way into Europe, pillaging and taking treasure and people in much the same way that the Vikings did, although that period obviously was a little bit later on. So as you can see, Ireland did actually have the beginnings of what would have been an empire had they not been sort of held in check by both the Saxons and the Vikings. It looks like, when you delve into history, there's no one that gets off scot-free. Everybody's tried to do it, and everybody else, including Ireland. So, when people tell you, oh, Ireland never colonized anywhere, never attacked anywhere, never did anything bad. Well, that's not true. They did, just like everybody else did at that time period. So there you go. So that's all I got to say for now. Hope you enjoyed the video, and give it a thumbs up or a like if you did. And if you're not a subscriber already, I'd be delighted if you do choose to subscribe. And I'll see you in a couple of months, if you're still interested in hearing what I've got to say by then. I hope so, if we're all still here. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye-bye. That's it for now.